So, did anybody else decide they were going to take the long weekend off and announce it to their readers 5 minutes before the internet blew up? Or was that just me? Now, unless you spent the last week trapped in bottom side by your biggest teammate, you may have heard a thing or two about the Craig Jones Invitational, its challenge to ADCC's claim as the biggest game in town, both literally and metaphorically. While Jones initially announced his plans to host the event weeks ago, it has exploded into reality ever since the Tackett brothers became the first ADCC qualified athletes to announce their withdrawal to participate in the event, and in the days since, the names have been coming in hot, headlined by world number 1 Ffion Davies coming for a super fight despite the CJI not having a bracket for the women. Yet. So, if you find yourself struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire news coming out of the two Vegas events, here's everything you need to know to be up to speed. Hailed by some as the Olympics of no-gi grappling, ADCC has been held up as the pinnacle of no-gi accomplishment in the BJJ world, but while the competition levels have grown and grown through the years as BJJ has moved down its path of astronomical growth over the last decade, the prize money on offer from ADCC has not, with champions still earning $10,000 like they did decades ago. Now, it's not entirely fair to say that payouts have been stagnant. After all, once you factor in inflation, it's more fair to say the value of a win has been cut nearly in half. Enter the CJI. You can argue whether Craig's intentions are truly to take care of grapplers or just to be a troll, and the real answer probably lies somewhere in the middle, but ultimately, all that really matters is the practical effects, and the practical effect of the announced CJI structure was that a man losing his first bout at CJI would take home $1 more than a man winning his division at ADCC, and the two bracket champions would pocket a cool $1 million each, shattering any previously held single event payouts in BJJ history. With that kind of bait on offer, it was always clear that if Jones could convince grapplers that the event, and more importantly the money, were real, ADCC was going to have a problem. Last Friday, it became clear that Jones had done enough to show elite grapplers he wasn't just trolling about, and the chance to walk home with 7 figures was extremely real. The Tackett brothers were the first to break the dam, putting up posts acknowledging that the dream of winning ADCC was a real one, but the opportunity on offer from CJI was simply undeniable because, as it turns out, when your job is jiu-jitsu, it is really helpful to do your jiu-jitsu at the place that is paying job-level wages. While this was big news, the real game changer was just around the corner. When it comes to actually competing in no-gi jiu-jitsu matches, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone doing it better than Ffion over the last year, who heads into ADCC as a defending champion with a 15-match winning streak taking part almost entirely out of the gi, including a double gold performance at IBJJF Worlds, title match wins for Polaris, Who's Number 1 and Subversion, and victories against ADCC qualifiers from all 3 women's divisions. Well, was heading, because Saturday morning she broke the internet by announcing her withdrawal from ADCC to participate in a super fight on CJI. It was a real, where were you when you heard level announcement. Personally, I just finished my first go at my gym's 2-hour competition class, a send-off edition for a teammate preparing to go to IBJJF Worlds, and wanted very badly to get home and lie in my bed forever. Instead, I spent 25 minutes on my phone in the parking lot. While, as yet, it doesn't seem that CJI will be fully rating the women's divisions, leaving a lot of great grapplers to hope for next time, and stay tuned for more on that, the news on the men's side has not stopped with the Tacketts. The Nickies, Ryan and Rod, have both confirmed their removal from ADCC and are joined by Joseph Chen and Mason Fowler. As I'm scripting this, it's been announced that Sub-99 invitee Roberto Jimenez will be withdrawing to chase the big bucks, and rumors of Micah Galval making a decision after Worlds have been floated. As the to-date only non-ADCC qualified entrant, retired UFC middleweight champion Luke Rockhold will also be taking his post-MMA tour through the foundational arts to the world of grappling. There is every chance that at the time between me recording this and it going live, there will have been further names announced. What's clear is that, while the women's division seems likely to go off mostly unchanged unless there's a pivot to additional super fights, there is going to be some serious disruption to the men's side of things, and you'd be wise to expect more names to join the list in the weeks ahead. In the early days of Craig's campaign, not a whole lot. When asked about the event, Mo said Craig was still welcome to come and coach, but if ADCC were viewing it as a potential serious competitor, it wasn't showing much. As the event became more real and it seemed increasingly likely the attack would be more direct, that did begin to change. Mo addressed questions about the event while going live, as transcribed by BJJ docs, questioning whether Craig was doing it for the right reasons, which was an extremely not-it response as demonstrated by the ongoing rush of athletes very willing to accept the right money for the wrong motivation, please and thank you. Following the news that many grapplers were officially withdrawing, Mo was again asked about the CJI, and his response has changed to a more magnanimous approach, while doubling down on the off-the-mats extras that CJI would not be able to compete with, highlighting how his priority is making a show that those outside the sport can enjoy just as much, and comparing an ADCC event to a Pride show of the 2000s. He also discussed the amazing ticket sales for the event. something Gordon Ryan brought up when tickets first went on sale, and he claimed more than 2 million had moved in the first hour. Mo's response seems to lend credence to this, noting that the event sold 6,400 seats in a half hour, has sold out the entire lower bowl, and looks set to provide a full sellout of the 14,000-seat arena at not cheap prices. A really great bit of news for ADCC, though one that maybe doesn't do a whole lot of favors to the argument that a $250,000 prize pool is all ADCC could afford. Between massive gate receipts, a streaming deal with pricey flow, and major sponsorships, that's the kind of math that might lead one to wonder where all the money is going, and why the answer seems to be so heavily skewed toward making it feel like a pride event, while only briefly losing a few stray bills as it breezes past grapplers' pockets. Perhaps the most definitive and damning shot fired wasn't by ADCC or CJI, but instead the 30-minute Q&A dropped by Ffion on Wednesday. If I can figure out how to do so, you should see a link to that right here in the video, but either way, a link to that video as well as others mentioned will be available in the description, and I highly recommend checking it out for yourself. In discussing it with some friends over the past few days, my main takeaway was that everything I could have hoped to hear from someone with her platform making the decision she did is there. In the video, she carefully and thoroughly explains why she made the choice, touches on the broader BJJ landscape, advocates for overall grappler care improvements, and expresses her interest to use her position atop the sport to try to make things better for everyone, especially the women who this sport continues to treat as second-class citizens. While this is no substitute for checking it out yourself, I pulled some key sections I want to discuss and highlight, just to show how much she addressed so many of my biggest concerns about the BJJ world. When first hearing about Ffion's super fight, I expressed my hope for a future match where she faced the -55 champion, and both make more than the $6,000 on offer for winning the division. Ffion? Yeah, she's been thinking about that too. An interesting factor when it comes to post-ADCC earning that Ffion raised from her experience that I hadn't even considered is how much matches at tournaments can harm your potential to make money with matches in the months that follow. She noted how promotions were uninterested in a match with Gabby after the two competed in the Absolute division at No-Gi Worlds, while a rematch of the 2022 ADCC final with Brianna St. Marie required both her and Ffion to spend nearly 2 years facing and beating other grapplers before it was considered about interesting enough to pay for as a one-off. By the time you come through an ADCC field, you've just completed a tournament with 7 of your top potential opponents. Having the top-ranked grappler sitting out the field provides an immediate and easy matchmaking opportunity for the champion to leverage their win into another paycheck. For months, I've been banging the drum for expanding women's brackets, something that is so obviously backed up by the depths of field if you paid any attention to the world of women's BJJ. The fact that only half of women's trials are actual trials is embarrassing, and that an athlete as talented and accomplished as Alex Enriquez could go gold-silver in the 2 North American trials and not get an invite is absurd. If Craig is as great of a troll as folks swear he is, that's the match I'd have him make for Ffion, and I'd make sure the super fight pays more than Gordon's for good measure, just to see if learning that made Gordy blow a gasket hard enough to need another long break with a case of very bad poops. Now, along with expansion, an increase of the pay-on offer to match men, which, for all the discussion of how CJI was offering $1 more to show than ADCC is to win, that figure does not even factor in that women's champions are also making 60% as their male counterparts. Ffion? She had thoughts. Hey guys, Future Bobby checking in because everything's happening so fast that in the day between me writing and recording for this and then actually being able to edit and upload it, naturally more stuff has come to light. So on Thursday, Mo was doing another live and Alex Welding popped on, brought up the issue of the unequal pay between the men's and women's divisions, and sort of on the spot, he just said, you know what, fuck it. Doesn't mean anything to just bump it up, so we're going to bump it up, we're going to make everything equal. That's great. Awesome to know that the women will now be getting the same $18,000 in the total throughout the division, $10K for winning it. It begs the question, if it was so easy, why wasn't it just done before when it was clearly the right thing? And I think the obvious answer is before there wasn't competition, and now there is, and there wasn't the biggest name in women's grappling cutting a promo on the lack of equity in the sport for BJJ in the way that Ffion did the other day. So you get a little bit of pressure, a little bit of competitive pressure. You get a little bit of pressure from a big name athlete, and you get a little bit of pressure from media. What's the end result? Positive changes. You love to see it. Hopefully we see some more of it moving forward, but great news. While expansion to full fields and prize money would be an excellent first step, Ffion also brought up the issue of the simple lack of divisions for women, and seemingly poorly thought out decision of where to place the limits for them. While this year's edition does expand on the simple over-under 60 kilos dynamic of 2022, The -55, -65, +65 format still leaves a lot of room for variation in the largest division. One of the more interesting things on offer in the video was Ffion revealing that prior to the announcement of a third division, she had been considering sitting out the event, even without an alternative on offer, just to protest the unfair and dismissive approach that the two-division format offered. While acknowledging the expanded field and absolute are a step in the right direction, she noted that neither she nor any women she knew had been consulted on the division selection, and it shows in the divisions ultimately settled on. Now, Ffion's video was recorded before Mo's most recent interview in which he discussed the showmanship of ADCC as its primary selling point, but you could be forgiven for thinking otherwise for how directly it pushes back on that argument. Noting that as a grappler, she could care less about the pyro and theatrics when the money could instead be spent on better accommodations and purses, she questioned what the need was for such extravagant fare if it comes at the cost of being able to actually take care of the athletes who, she notes on repeat, are the actual product you are selling and the thing bringing fans through the door. The extras are nice, but given a choice between the best grapplers of the biggest party, it's an easy choice for the audience, and it's not coming down on the side of fewer world champions and more drums. Most importantly in my estimation, however, was her stated intention to use her platform to do everything she can to create more opportunities for athletes without it. BJJ finds itself in an interesting situation right now, as money is just starting to come in but has not yet reached the point where the biggest stars are fully inoculated to the concerns of those rounding out the undercards. If the biggest names choose to focus on getting theirs and nobody else, it will send us down the inevitable road toward the world of MMA, where time and again, big names say all the right things about fighter power and needing to change the sport, just long enough to get their bag with no concessions for the little guys. Do that long enough, and by the time you do get an industry leader with integrity willing to fight the good fight for everyone like Francis Ngannou, the best they can manage is securing the bag for a few additional fighters, not a seismic shift in how the sport operates entirely. Craig putting on an event like this is a good sign that some of the people with the power and platform in BJJ are willing to see beyond their own pockets. Ffion's discussion of those with power using it to leverage organizations like ADCC and IBJJF to do more for their grapplers is another strong one. Not only have CJI and Ffion's response addressed every major point that's come to mind since I heard it first announced, they've even checked off 2 of the big bullets in my 3 things I wanted from PGF that I felt could be applied to other organizations as well. The $10,001 purse raised the floor and is the kind of thing we need if we want to see the sport truly grow, as that's what will allow more grapplers to compete full-time, and that focus on offering more than just a big payday for the winner is something that other big organizations would do very well to emulate. As for the as yet still absent presence of a women's division in one of the many high-paying events popping up, while we're still left waiting, Ffion has promised to do everything she can to agitate so that the next one doesn't make the same mistake. Simply put, if it turns out that the first big money tournament for women comes about because the top-ranked grappler in the world refused to stop being a pest about it until someone did it, every sporting accomplishment in her already storied career will sit on the silver medal podium when the time comes to assess her contribution to the sport. We are long overdue for the first organization willing to commit to paying the amazing grapplers in the women's division, and there are no words for how excited I was to hear the biggest name in the sport vowing to do everything in her power to rectify that. On top of all that I've already covered, she also found time in the half-hour-long chat session to drop some bangers unrelated to the competition scene itself, by defending her decision to donate her portion of the money raised for charity to Gaza relief efforts, noting that even with this very good event, Craig's frat boy humor is still not very funny, and complaining about the absurd cost of flow. All takes that I find to be undeniably correct ones. Hey guys, Future Bobby again, because another piece of news that has broken in between me filming and being able to upload is that the years-long rumored match between Craig and Gabby is going to go down. This is kind of a textbook example for me of why I don't really ride with Craig's humor, because it's never struck me as a match he's particularly interested in for true competitive reasons. He likes that he can make his joke posts, with no regard for the fact that the result of those joke posts, without fail, is comment sections full of toxic misogyny. And not just from the likes of the Gordon stands, who are going to be awful no matter what, but a lot of dudes who probably would consider themselves to be pretty good teammates to their female teammates, but who still laugh at things like false rape accusations. And it strikes me as a lose-lose for the women's BJJ community writ large, because if Gabby wins, I don't think it really does anything for women's BJJ, because the way she is treated and responded to, it's just going to lead to the majority of those awful people just making comments about how she's a dude and making, jokes about how she's a man, which is its own whole fucked up thing. Whereas if Craig wins, it's going to be used to discredit women's BJJ, despite the fact that you have women much smaller than Craig, 2 of them competing in ADCC this upcoming this upcoming year, in August, in Amanda Levy and Amy Campo, who've done the same thing, but that won't matter. People will just say, look, this large woman went out there and she lost to Craig. Clearly women's BJJ is not on the same level. And so no matter what happens, it just feels like a lot of really awful things are going to be written, and it's going to have a negative impact, and that sucks. All in all, my assessment of the video, gold star, 0 notes. More of this energy in the sport, and we might just find ourselves with a pretty dope BJJ scene in the near future. Well, the short answer is in a pretty good place. Where things sit on the competition side of things is still to be seen, with the exact damage done to the ADCC fields hard to assess until we know the final rosters. Will we see a tipping point where the CJI brackets become the most high-profile men's brackets, not just financially, but competitively? It's certainly in play. As for whether we'll have a shakeup on the industry long-term, it's too early to say. But if you're of the mind that the BJJ scene has been long overdue for one, it's hard to see what more you could have hoped to have seen from CJI and its participants so far. Hey folks, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the last week of craziness in BJJ as much as I have. If you like what I'm doing here on Creonte, covering the sport of BJJ with an emphasis on the women's divisions, consider subscribing. If you've got some money laying around, you want to support it, please check out the Patreon, give us a follow on Instagram, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the future.